Welcome, everyone, to yet another edition of the IB Countdown to Kickoff show. I am Vince DeDario. That is Jesse Stiers. And if you notice, he is in the realm of Sean Stiers. So he's channeling the Sean Stiers nature of the show. And because Sean is in the Bahamas, I know, rough life that the man leads, for work, because that is where the women's basketball team is. And so they've got a game today, I think about 4:30. Does that sound right, Jess? Have you looked?
Yeah,
I
I think somewhere around like 4:15, 4:30, 4
there you
in
go.
that range.
Yep. So they're playing today. So he's down there soaking up the rays, having a good time. But we are here to get you primed and ready for game day. Clearly, it's game day. I got the Icy Whites on, undefeated in the Icy Whites, and I'm still convinced as a fan that if I wear this, they will win because I have control over the wins and the losses of this team.
Listen, Vince, the Cowboys looked like crap against the Giants on Thanksgiving. At halftime, I switched to my Cowboys gear, and what do you think happened? Completely different second half. Sports is all
Coincidence?
about superstition, and I'm all about it. We got to do
Right.
our part on our end to keep the universe balanced. If we're just tilted a little bit off, I think things could be drastically different. So I'm very happy you pulled out the Icy Whites today.
That's what you got to do. I mean, I am nothing if not a man of tradition, and that is my tradition. I've been wearing them since. Well, I wore them for BYU because they were wearing all whites. I took a break, which clearly was a mistake. But then went back to them, and here we are. So we were undefeated. Clemson, yes, duh. And then obviously last week was quite the showing by Notre Dame and their 44-0 thrashing of Boston College. Jesse Stiers, what is your big takeaway from that game moving into this game?
The biggest takeaway for me and what we need to continue to see this week is the defensive performance. That big goose egg on the board is the most notable thing anytime you play a team. I don't care if it's Boston College, if it's Clemson, whoever it might be. It is hard to shut a team out at the college level, to not allow 0 points. And I need to see that this week. I need to see the defense causing havoc. I need the defense to get turnovers because ultimately they need to do anything they can to slow down Caleb Williams this week. And create extra possessions and take away possessions from USC.
No doubt about that. And, that game was great on a lot of levels. Obviously, they scored in the first 8 possessions, 5 touchdowns, 3 field goals, every possession of the first half, and then the first possession of the second half in obviously weather that was not super conducive to scoring in the second half. So, but by the time they went up 44-0, it was, you could put it on cruise control to a degree. They drove all the way down the field in another possession, but then turned it over on downs on like the 7-yard line. So they controlled the clock. They controlled the game. There was never any time in that game where it was in doubt that Notre Dame was going to pull out the victory. So, I mean, it was a good game. I mean, it was a great last home game. It was a great senior day, all of that, but it all leads up to this game, obviously. There's a lot riding on this game for both USC and Notre Dame. We will get into all of that. But we're going to break down the Boston College game just a little bit before we jump into what we're expecting to happen against Southern Cal. We've got a lot of time here, Jess, and we're going to have some fun with this. But I want to get your thoughts on the game. We talked about it a little bit on Monday, but let's break this thing down just a little bit. Thoughts on the game plan from both coordinators, your likes, your dislikes. I mean, it's hard to find things you didn't like from a 44-0. Obviously, defense didn't give up any points. Offense put up a bunch. But what were your thoughts on the game plan by the coordinators? I think that goes a long way to what's going to happen this week.
Yeah, so I really liked what Notre Dame did. Obviously, against an inferior opponent like Boston College, you can get into maybe trying some things offensively, kind of getting a little experimental, running. And that's kind of, I think, up Tommy Rees's alley. But I like that they stuck to the run game. They still continue to hammer the ball, and they were still, using the pass game off of their run game. Drew Pine only completed 13 passes out of his 25 attempts, 156 yards, 1 touchdown. But then Logan Diggs had 15 carries for 122, which is an 8-yard average. Audric Estime had 11 carries for 71 yards. It's a 6.5 average. And then Chris Tyree had 6 carries for 50 yards, which is an 8.3 average. So seeing all of those backs over, a 6-yard average, and you have 2 other guys over an 8 yard per carry. That's the most important thing, because this three-headed monster, Notre Dame's three-headed monster at running back, is what's going to win the game for them against USC today. That core of three guys, whether it's running the ball, whether it's getting into two-back personnel, one-back personnel, and catching screens out of the backfield, catching wheel routes out of the backfield, those three running backs have to have the most productive day out of the entire, out of all the groups on the Notre Dame team. So I really like that Tommy Rees stuck to the run game, getting those guys their carries, getting those guys, like I said, those yards per carry were very good, and just really letting Drew Pine be an accessory to them, right? He doesn't need to be the guy that's going to take over the game. He just needs to manage the game and make, certain passes when he needs to. And being efficient on third down, obviously picking up, third and short situations. That's Drew Pine's biggest task this week, is when they get into third and short, he needs to be able to convert on third and short and keep these drives going. You don't necessarily need to score every drive, right? But you need to be able to extend drives, keep the ball out of Caleb Williams' hands, and keep your defense off the field and get them some rest, because Caleb Williams they're going to put up points. That's inevitable, but you have to limit the amount of points that they get to. So offensively, that's what I really enjoyed about their game plan.
All right, give me your thoughts on the defense, Al Golden's group, and what they were able to do to Boston College.
Yeah, so this one's a little bit tougher because, Boston College was obviously rolling with the backup quarterback with Emmett Moorhead, obviously Phil oh my goodness, Jakovic.
There you go. You got it.
Wasn't playing. But most importantly, Notre Dame, biggest weakness for Notre Dame on defense, to me, is their run game. They have a very good secondary. They have a very good defensive line. And their second level, their linebackers, really is what's been their weakness this year. And I think if teams really want to damage Notre Dame, they can get into the run game. But Boston College really never got that going. They had three different running backs going. One had 7 carries for 25 yards. Another had 8 carries for 24 yards. And another had 12 for 23 yards. So all of those averages were under 3.5, which is great to see. And that's what you need to see. They need to shut down the run game and make teams become one-dimensional. I don't think that necessarily translates into today's game. I think the number one priority is shutting down the pass game, making it a one-dimensional, trying to make USC run, getting USC in long down shortage, situations, getting them behind the chains, getting them in second and long, third and long. I mean, again, it doesn't – second and third and long, it doesn't mean as much as these other teams because of the talent of Caleb Williams and USC. They have that big play potential, but obviously you want to get teams out of schedule and into second and third and long. So I like the way that they shut them down in both dimensions, right? They shut them down in the run game, nothing was there. They shut them down in the pass game, nothing was there. And obviously that's evident by a dominant performance when a team puts up 0 points. I think the thing that I need to see more of today, and I'm not saying that this was a bad thing against Boston College, but it's an inferior opponent. Boston College has a very bad offensive line. Notre Dame needs to get pressure today. That is the number one thing. They need to get pressure. They need to make Caleb Williams uncomfortable and give their secondary, a break. You can't make your guys sit in coverage all day. You have to be able to help them on the front end. I think that's a true mark of a good defense. If you have I think that's the most important aspect of a defense, is having a solid defensive line, because not only can you disrupt the run game, but then you also help your secondary on the back end by getting lots of pressure and creating havoc for the quarterback.
I like it a lot. So let's dive into the offense here just a little bit. You rattled off the stats for the 3 running backs and what they were able to do. I mean, 8.1 yards a carry, 6.5 yards a carry, 8.3 yards a carry. And the Irish scored on their first 8 possessions, as I mentioned earlier. Do they need to do that? Do they need to replicate that performance in order to get a win today? Do they need to score on their first 8 possessions if they get that many? Or is this more of a, I don't know, score on every other? Like, what are your thoughts on how often they need to come away with points on their possessions?
This is a tough question because Notre Dame doesn't want to get into a shootout with USC. I don't believe that is their ideal game plan or what's ultimately going to win them the game. They can't afford to get into a shootout with USC. And what I mean by a shootout is I think if USC scores 40 points in this game, I think USC wins. You can't let them get into the 40 range. I can potentially see 30s, but you have to do your best to keep them in the 20 range if you want, a realistic shot to win. And like I was talking about earlier, you don't need to score on every drive. You need to have controlled tempo. You need to pick up first downs. You need to keep the chains moving, keep your defense off the field. You're probably going to see between 10 and 12 possessions throughout the game. And really, I think Notre Dame needs to score 30 points, in my opinion, to win, but they need to do it in a controlled tempo while also limiting USC out of that 40 range. Because if you get into a track meet with USC, you're going to lose this game. So I think we're going to see a little bit similar of a game plan to Ohio State, but that was game 1, and now we're on game 12. So the offense is in a much different place. I think that game plan is refined. It's a lot better. And I'm not saying follow that same game plan. I think you need to do things better or a little bit different than what you did against Ohio State, but that same kind of mindset, controlling time of possession, powering them, asserting your physical dominance so those things wear out over the game.
Jess, we've talked a lot, your dad specifically, about 21 personnel, 31 personnel that we've seen as well. But the three-headed monster in the backfield and Diggs, Estime, and Chris Tyree, right?
Right.
You mentioned it, right? Game 1, we are now on game 12. This is the last guaranteed game that anyone has in the regular season. It's game 12. Obviously, Notre Dame's going to go to a bowl game someplace. The maturation process of the game plan, utilizing these 3 running backs going into game 12, what we saw in game 11 and everything beforehand, the process from where we were to where we are you happy about the way that they use the 3 running backs? Are there things that they can do better? What are your thoughts on really what the strength of this team is, the run game, and then how they're using what could arguably call the deepest running back room in the nation?
Yeah, so I think that they've hit, like, they're at a scale of 1 to 10. I think they've hit like an 8 of their potential with this 3 backs right now. You look at Audric Estime's numbers; he's got 136 carries, 782 yards. Logan Diggs, 140 carries and 698 yards. Both are averaging over 5 a carry. Those are really good numbers, right? And if you can have almost 2 backs at 1,000 yards at the end of the season, I mean, what more could you ask for? And then you throw in Chris Tyree, which is your kind of more scat back. I think the biggest difference between Ohio State week 1 and now is you have Logan Diggs healthy. And I think Logan Diggs is the complete back out of the 3 of them. I think he's a guy who can get downhill if he needs to. He's quicker than Estime. He's not quite as powerful as Estime, but he's more elusive, meaning in the hole. I've said this before, in the hole, he can make a guy miss and get up to top speed like instantly again, right? Like he can get back up to his top speed and get out of the hole and get out of the second level very quickly. Whereas Estime, he's running you over and he's really going to get back up to quick speed again, right? He's like a downhill, very quick downhill, but at contact, he's not going to accelerate quite as quick. So I think the combination of using Logan Diggs early, using him in 1st and 10, second down, and then using Estime as your relief back, your power back on the 3rd and 2, the 3rd and 1, getting into the goal line. I think those are the things that you have to see. There needs to be a very nice rhythm or synchronization between Estime and Diggs and knowing when to utilize both of them in today's game. And then you throw in the aspect of passing the ball to them, right? And you establish this run game, you're handing off, and then you just leak some of these backs out of the backfield and hit them on some screens. I retweeted a video earlier this week. I think it was like 4 years ago against USC. One of Notre Dame's backs caught a simple screen out of the backfield because USC was low in the box. They were trying to create pressure that creates one-on-one matchups with linebackers on the outside. And that's what these running backs need to take advantage of, is getting one-on-one matchups in open space in a multitude of different ways and getting the balls in their hands. And I'd love to see that at a 2-back set. I know we talk about 2-back sets so much, right? But this is to me, like, if you want to talk about a game where you have to utilize 2-back sets the most, this is the one, because you're going against a high caliber opponent. You got to do things out of the ordinary to create extra first downs, extra possessions, what have you. And if you can flip the ball to your running backs out of the backfield, that also creates, better matchups for a guy like Michael Mayer. I don't know, the best tight end in the country. It allows your kind of speedier guys like Lindsey and Styles and Merriweather to get downfield and take the top off the defense at the same time. So when these running backs are at their best, meaning that they're running the ball and they're a threat also out of the backfield, it just makes this offense so much better. It takes the pressure off everyone else, and that's really when they're going to start rolling.
I think that's a really good point, because we know the strength of this team is running the football. We know the strength of this team is the offensive line. We're talking offense right now. And they need to lean into that, but they also need to be creative with it, right? They need to leak those backs out, like you said. They need to run counter. They need to show, what they want to do in duo and then go the other way with it. They need to do some different things. They need to break tendency. They need to, that's what I need to see from the game plan from Tommy Rees. And I think you can lean into what you're really good at and still be good at it, but by doing something a little bit different, something that an average USC defense maybe or maybe not will be prepared for, right? And you need to take advantage of that because of the offense that you're facing and their propensity to score a ton of points, and they can score it in bunches. You can hold them down in the first half, and this game will not be over, right? Because they can score in bunches and they can come back. They're one of the best teams at coming back from a deficit. So you have to be creative. You have to possess the ball to a degree. Now, if they're giving you something, you take it, even if it means a 2-minute drive or a 3-minute drive as opposed to an 8-minute drive. You take it, right? If they're loading the box, you got one-on-one on the outside against Braden Lindsey, you take that shot. You take that opportunity. But you need to do it within the scale of your offense. And I think that's one of the most important things that this team needs to do. And I'm not saying that they need to be a completely different offense than what we've seen in the first 11 games. They just need to keep evolving, and they need to keep getting better, and they need to keep doing the things that they're asked to be doing. I think Tommy Rees has gotten himself into a nice flow and a nice rhythm when it comes to game planning and calling a game and all of those different things. Obviously, the guys need to execute. They need to take the mentality that they had last week against Boston College, the mentality that they had at home against Clemson, and that needs to get on a plane and it needs to travel to California. And I think if they can travel their attitude and their fight and their aggressive personality and all of the things that they have become in the first 11 games, they're going to be okay offensively in this game. But they need to execute the game plan. The game plan needs to be well thought out. And again, this defense isn't amazing, right? They're giving up over 400 yards of offense. and we'll get into that a little bit more as we talk about USC. But they're giving up a ton of yards. There's plays to be made against this defense. They just need to be creative in the way that they do it. So, speaking of creativity, Drew Pine. Drew Pine is what? 8-1 as a starter? Does that sound? Yeah, 8-1 as a starter.
8-1 catches a lot of flack. I take an 8-1 starter. I don't know about you, Vince.
I would take an 8-1 starter. And that one is perplexing since it was against Stanford, but some of the 8 have been really, really good. And that's the hard part about Drew Pine, right? And going into this game, what we need to see from Drew Pine, he can't have the game that he had against Clemson. He can't throw for 85 yards and expect to beat this team. I wouldn't think, right? So they're going to have to do some things with Drew Pine. They're going to get him going, but he doesn't have to be Drake May. He doesn't have to be Trevor Lawrence. He doesn't have to be playing outside his body, right? He just needs to be himself. He needs to be Drew Pine. He needs to throw for 185, 200 yards, right?
I like the 200 number.
Yeah, I do too. I really do. I like that 200 number as well. It'd be great if he was about 60% completion percentage. I'd be okay with that. But, last week, 13 for 25, 156 yards and a touchdown, 52% completion. His day was average, but he didn't have to be more than average because of they ran for over 280 yards, right? So that was enough in that game. What do you think is going to be enough for USC?
So you talked a lot about really good things there. And I think Tommy, the reason why we saw the dominance and success against Clemson is Tommy Rees switched up looks and went against tendencies. And that's exactly what you were talking about and things that need to carry over into this USC game. And so how do you do that? And getting into, different, showing one thing that you've been showing and, teams have been preparing for on film and just adding a small wrinkle to kind of switch things up and just get the eyes and get the things moving just a little bit differently. But in terms of Drew Pine, I really like that 175, I think is the most realistic number. But if he can get over 200 and the ground game can get over 200, I think it's going to be a very, very tough day for USC because I don't think they're going to be able to handle Notre Dame's physical dominance on the offensive line. I don't think they're going to be able to handle Notre Dame's physicality when it comes to their running backs. But Drew Pine, he needs to get moving, right? We don't need to. I don't want to see any balls getting batted down today. There's no more time for that for Drew Pine. He's got to get the ball out. There needs to be 0 deflected balls today because those are wasted plays, right? Those are just easy Defense didn't even have to do anything but stick their arm up and deflect the ball. So I think you need to get, Drew Pine rolling on the edge to his right side. I think he's a very good quarterback when he's rolling out and throwing on the move. And it suits his game because you can get into a lot of play actions, kind of RPO looks, and you can roll out and you can flip the ball into the flat to Lorenzo Styles. You can flip the ball into the flat to Michael Mayer running, long drag routes across the field or comebacks down the sideline. Whatever it might be, Drew Pine's passing game is immensely helped when he rolls out, and especially to his right side. It gets defenders out of his face. He can see see down the field, I think, a little bit better. So for me, I want to see Drew Pine over 175, and I want to see him kind of moving his feet and rolling out of the pocket in terms of the passing game.
I like that. And I think that puts him in his comfort zone. I think there is still some truth to the fact that he needs to get comfortable in order to be comfortable for the entire game. I think there is some truth to that, which is fantastic. I think finally Tommy Rees understands Drew Pine, and I think there's some synchronicity there between the two of them, and I think we're going to see that, later on tonight. Let's talk a little bit about the defense. Obviously, not a ton of possessions for the defense in this game. They did a really, really good job. Let's see. BC had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. They had 12 possessions if you count the last one of the game. They had 6 times where they turned the ball over, 3 interceptions, 2 fumbles, once on downs. Then they punted another 4 times, and then end of the half, the other 2. So obviously no points there. Notre Dame did a great job. They had 3 3-and-outs. They had, it was just a game where the defense pretty much dominated, but there wasn't a lot of opportunity for, major tackle numbers. You had J.D. Bertrand. He had 5. Jalen Sneed, in kind of a complimentary role, also had 5 tackles. And then Jack Kaiser right behind them with 4. So your thoughts on the defense, maybe from a linebacker's perspective, since that's what you were, your thoughts on them, and then what they're going to need to do today as well.
Yeah, so in a game like Boston College, when you're getting off the field quickly and the other team's offense isn't doing much and there's a lot of incomplete passes, obviously your linebackers are going to have, like you said, that the tackle numbers aren't going to really be there. And as a defensive coordinator, that's kind of what you want, right? Like you don't want, if your team is getting off the field, that means you're shutting them out. You're not letting them move the ball. There's incomplete passes or short runs, whatever it might be. But I think today, at a linebacker standpoint, is going to be more about playing in space, helping out your secondary, dropping into the what are called like the hook zone or the middle of the field hole, getting in the hole, getting into the flats on the sidelines quickly. And most importantly, linebackers, I'll tell you, and it's kind of what I struggled with the most, but it's the most important, is you gotta diagnose run pass quickly. And so say you're in like a 2x2 set, meaning you got 2 wide receivers to each side, right? I'm sure we'll see a lot of that, probably a lot of 3x1.
Oh yeah.
Your first job as a linebacker when you see pass is you got to fly out immediately and get hands on that wide receiver. Get disruption. It's getting these wide receivers off their routes. You just jam them, but that gives your secondary a half a second to a second to, recover. And obviously it knocks these wide receivers off of their routes. So these linebackers have to be able to play in space. They got to be able to disrupt throwing lanes and get hands on these wide receivers, because it's only going to help out their secondary. And we all know that USC wants to run the ball. It's a Lincoln Riley offense. It's Caleb Williams. Caleb Williams has gaudy numbers right now as a quarterback. He's a front runner for the Heisman. So anything that these linebackers can do to disrupt the pass game is what is their most important task today. And obviously, you got to be able to shut down the run, the times that they are going to want to run the ball. That's a given. That's a linebacker's everyday duty, is shutting down the run. But the hard stuff is playing in space, getting hands on these wide receivers and disrupting them.
Completely agree with that. And I am ecstatic that J.D. Bertrand is going to be in this game, because I feel like USC is going to throw a lot of eye candy at this Notre Dame defense.
He's the most disciplined linebacker of the group.
That is accurate. And, a Jack Kaiser. And yes, these guys are not the most athletic guys, and everybody wants to see the youth movement. And the fact that Jalen Sneed tied for the team lead in tackles last week gets everybody all excited and gives you the goosebumps. And Prince Collie is
this is USC. This is not right. Boston College. There's a lot of different this scheme and complexity goes up times 100. Like this,
Yes.
it goes from a very poor Boston College offense to one of the best offenses in the country. So Colley and Snead aren't ready for these kind of situations. And Bertrand is. He's the experienced vet. He knows how to line up. He knows how to study the film. And that's a big thing as a linebacker. You study film all week. The linebacker is the field general, right? He sees things. You get into you notice tendencies when offenses get into certain formations and sets. Okay, alert. Like this play is going, there's a high chance that this play is going to happen. You know, based on formation, based on alignment, like a running back could line up an extra yard out wide, right? Or the wide receiver could be on the inside of the hash or the outside of the hash. These are things that linebackers look at in their film study and just give them that extra advantage. And I know that's what JD Bertrand has been doing all week.
Absolutely correct. And so what he lacks in athletic ability, he makes up for in what he brings to the table from a preparation standpoint, from an intelligence standpoint, and from an experience standpoint. I know there's going to be a lot of people that probably don't agree with you and I on that one, but that is when you go into a rivalry game like this with so much on the line, you go in with the guys that you trust. And I'm not saying that they don't trust Jalen Snead and Prince Colley and some of those younger guys. It's just different, man. Like this, you have to ride with the guys that got you there. And there will be a time for those guys in the future. And there's also going to be a time for those guys in this game. There's going to be opportunities for those guys. There's going to be spots for those guys to come in and be successful, but it's not in the role that people want them to be in already, I would say. So it's going to be a lot of fun to watch these guys, and a lot is going to hinge on this linebacking core. There's no doubt about that.
I think an important aspect of what you were talking about is defenses are designed, Vince, to funnel the play and everyone to be in complete synchronization. So if one guy is off, that's a complete that can cause a bust in a play, and a play can go for 70 yards instead of being an incompletion. And so when you have guys like Colley and Snead who have all this athletic ability, sure, but if they get out of their spot and one play, that's USC's offense. They'll rip you for a 60-yard pass play if your guy's out of spot on just one play. So just knowing and lining up in the right spot, being in the right spot is half the battle. And as much as you want to see these guys out there because they do make better plays in space and they have more athleticism and so on and so forth, you can't compromise the rest of your team and the entire defense by potentially having a guy out of alignment or a half a yard behind or not dropping into his zone quite as quickly.
Nope, completely agree with you. And you mentioned that, getting hands on these receivers and disrupting them and all that, it helps the secondary. Let's talk about the secondary a little bit. Obviously, we're all hoping that Brandon Joseph is healthy and is a go for today. I haven't heard otherwise. It sounds like he is a go, but we will know soon enough. But then let's talk about the true freshman. All right. Benjamin Morrison picks up 3 interceptions last week. He is one shy of the national lead. He is the leader for true freshmen. Believe it or not, there is a true freshman at Utah State, Ike Larson, who has 4, believe it or not, but Benjamin Morrison passed him up last week. So he's got 5, and the national leaders are all at 6. And I believe there are 3 of them with 6. So big time opportunity for Benjamin Morrison, obviously, this week. They're going to pick on him. He's the true freshman. Doesn't matter what he's done up to this point. If you're a true freshman, you're going to get picked on by an offensive coordinator. That's going to happen. So look for the ball to come his way. So he's got a chance to tie or take a lead on the national leaders. Talk to me a little bit about what you've seen from him in pass coverage, but also in his tackling, which I think is a big plus going into this game.
Yeah, so the number one thing I noticed about Benjamin Morrison, and it sticks out the most, is just his overall composure. You wouldn't know by looking at him that he's a freshman. He looks like a guy who's been doing this for years and years. And I think I said it earlier this week, is it would be one thing if this was like a junior or like a red shirt, a fifth-year senior along those lines to be putting up these stats. But this is a true freshman just going out there and handling business and playing like a seasoned veteran. That is the most impressive part to Benjamin Morrison's game to me. He takes on the challenge of guys throwing at him. He wants guys to throw at him, and he wants to be that playmaker. He wants to be the guy that's going to take over the game, and having that kind of gumption and courage as a freshman, having no fear, is just a great thing to see, Vince. And I know as a coach, that is something that you would look for in a lot of your players, is just the confidence to be out there, right? Like it's one thing for the coaches to trust you and put you out there, but you got to have trust in yourself and know that you're going to be able to make a play. And that's all that Benjamin Morrison has done. And he's done it in the most important games, right? Like the first half of the season, fine. He's getting his feet wet. He's playing well. He's doing a lot of good things. But when it's mattered most here on the back end, that's when we're seeing him make the most important plays. And that's what you need out of your big-time playmakers. Big-time playmakers make big-time plays in big-time situations. And that's all that Benjamin Morrison does. And you talked about, coverage is one thing, but you got to be a complete cornerback. And Clemson wanted to try him with the screens on the perimeter and the quick passes, and he shut that down too. He's a very excellent tackler in open space, and for his frame and size, it's even more impressive because he's undersized, right? Like cornerbacks are small guys. Their main responsibility is coverage. They don't want to stick their nose into the tackling or the run game or, coming downhill. But he also takes on that advantage, and you wouldn't know that he is a cornerback because he tackles like a safety. He tackles like a linebacker, and he shuts it all down. He's a complete cornerback. He's going to be a great cornerback in the NFL someday, and he's already shown that he can shut you down in both dimensions of the game. And that's along with his courage and gumption and trust in himself that's what makes him the complete deal. Is he's out there every week showing that he can shut you down in the pass, he can shut you down in the run, and he believes in himself all while doing it.
Well, and it just has a very similar feeling to 2 years ago when we're talking about Michael Mayer and what he was doing as a true freshman. And you're sitting back and you're thinking to yourself, thank God we're forced to have him for another 2 years because, he could go make plays right now. I mean, granted, college is a different level than the NFL. Don't get me wrong. But thank God he's going to be around for another 2 years because he's only going to get better. His demeanor is one of a kid who's only going to get better. He's got the attitude for it. He's a humble kid from at least on the field, he's a humble kid, handing the football back to the referee. He's a kid we can all get behind and get excited about. And he's just a different kind of shutdown corner than Notre Dame has had in a really long time. You can talk about, Julian Love and what he was able to do. He's having a great career in the NFL right now, but he was better in zone, right, than Benjamin Morrison. Benjamin Morrison will line up 1 yard away from you and just beat the crap out of you, stay in your back hip if you're trying to run a go route on you, and then not only pick it off, but he'll tackle you if you get the ball. Like he's the complete guy. He's the complete shutdown corner. You've got Morrison Island over there. Things are going very well on that side. My worry going into this game is, according to Marcus Freeman, Cam Hart is questionable coming into this game. And there's a lot of people out there, and myself included, Cam Hart has not lived up to the opportunity that I thought that he had coming into this season. I thought he was going to be the shutdown corner for Notre Dame. But there's also a reason the teams keep going after Ben Morrison, because Cam Hart is doing a pretty dang good job on the other side. And he has also shown a propensity to tackle in space and do a really good job. What if he's not a go today, which is a possibility? He's questionable, according to Coach Freeman. If he's not able to go, where do the Irish turn at that corner position?
That's a very good question. And I think what's benefited Notre Dame throughout the kind of back half of this season is we've seen a lot of different secondary pieces be rotated in and out with different kind of nagging injuries between Brandon Joseph and I think some other guys. And I'm not super keen or knowledgeable of Notre Dame's cornerback depth chart, to be honest with you. But I do know that they rotate a lot of guys in, whether they're in nickel and dime. And so there's a lot of guys who have a lot of experience. And so it makes it easier for, and Marcus Freeman will tell you that too. It's the next man up, right? These guys, we're at a level here where it's next man up and the next guy's got to be ready. And that's how they've been practicing all week. So do you want your best player out there? Sure. But I also think that Notre Dame has, a very deep secondary. I think that they've gone through some adversity in the secondary this year where other guys have been getting snaps and they have a very good rotation. And so is it ideal to have Cam Hart out there? Sure. But I don't think that they'll be at too much of a deficit, without him. I think that they have very good secondary pieces regardless. And listen, if you want to pick on a backup corner potentially, then, be it. But if you want to also go at Benjamin Morris, be my guest. I think no matter what, I think the secondary is up for the challenge today, right? Like that's what the coaches had to propose all week. And that's what they did against Clemson. Are you guys up for the challenge? And the secondary has to be up for the challenge the most this week. That's who Marcus Freeman challenged the most against Clemson, and he's going to challenge them the most against USC, based off of this high-powered offense. That Caleb Williams is going to throw the ball, and this secondary just has to do enough to slow him down and maybe get a turnover or two.
I completely agree. I'm very interested to see the route that Notre Dame takes if, in fact, Cam Hart is out, because you've got options, right? You've got Tariq Bracy, who has primarily been in the slot.
Big fan of Tariq Bracy, too.
But he can also play outside, and he has done so far this year. You've got Clarence Lewis, who can play inside or outside. And then, of course, you've got Jaden Mickey, the other true freshman, who had an amazing spring. And then Benjamin Morris came in and said, not so fast, my friend. But Jaden Mickey has had a lot of ups and downs this year. A lot of ups, a couple of downs. How does he respond? He's going to be an option there as well. If you move Tariq out to, be the outside corner, then do you bring in Jaden Mickey to be your nickel, right? Because I think nickel is going to be their primary package against this offense.
Bread and butter. You got to have an extra DB on the field.
So you're going to see, in my opinion, I think you're going to see a bit of a three-way rotation between Clarence Lewis, Tariq Bracy, and Jaden Mickey. And what that rotation,
which is what we've seen all year, right? Like that's why this is a good. Okay, it's never good when a player's hurt, but when you have guys who've been rotating and you have a solid rotation, you're built for situations like this.
Correct, absolutely. And a position that was a giant question mark going into the season, I think we can all say going into Week 12 has been one of the strengths of this team: the corners / defensive backs, and so they're going to have to lean on that, no doubt, against this offense. Speaking of this offense, Jesse Stiers, let's talk about USC specifically, okay? Who are these Trojans, right? It's Lincoln Riley's first season as the head coach out at Southern Cal, coming in from Oklahoma. And I don't know if you remember all the clandestine plane ride in the middle of the night from Oklahoma to USC. It was very, very weird.
And then he had that awkward introduction press conference. It looked like it was very it looked kind of like not USC, right? Like you would expect more. It kind of looked like hodgepodgey. Yeah, it was just weird. It was like Lincoln Riley's all of a sudden flying in the night on this jet, and then he shows up and they're doing this conference, and then all of a sudden you got all these guys transferring in with him, but that's a completely different story.
Well, you're not wrong though, and he went we'll get into how they put the team together, but this is the third all-time meeting by first-time head coaches for both teams, which I think is very interesting. Obviously, USC is 10-1 at this point with a 1-point road loss to Utah. They've already booked their spot in the Pac-12 championship game. So this is a big opportunity for Notre Dame. They have a chance to play and or defeat 3 teams that are in the conference championship next weekend. So that's something to play for if you're Notre Dame, for sure. The rivalry with Notre Dame dates back to 1926 and has been played every year except 3 years during World War II. And then, of course, the 2020 pandemic when everybody was conference only. They have a combined 24 national championships, 14 Heisman trophies, as well as a combined 184 All-Americans and 89 College Football Hall of Famers. And, of course, the jeweled shillelagh is on the line for the winter. I saw some pictures on social media that it was boarding the plane with the Irish, so they're taking it out to Southern Cal and hopefully putting it in a seatbelt on the way back later on tonight. But this is a team that is really, really good, and Lincoln Riley took advantage of the fact that the new college football, and he got, I think, 30 or so transfers into USC. And most of those 30 transfers are the guys that are contributing to this team, and mostly on offense, if we're being honest. And so in a normal situation, Lincoln Riley is looking at a 2 to 3 year, at least, rebuild from the bottom up, having to get on the recruiting trail and doing all of those things. But instead, he went out and got some reinforcements. And these reinforcements have been pretty stinking good for this team. They're, like I said, they're 11-1. They control their own destiny to the college football playoff. If you listen to any of the games yesterday and they would preview this game, it's all about USC. Notre Dame doesn't have a prayer, et cetera, et cetera. And it's all because of this offense, Jess. I mean, they're led by, as you had mentioned previous, a Heisman hopeful, Caleb Williams. Came in from Oklahoma with Lincoln Riley. I think he was probably in the baggage claim off that plane in the middle of the night. But he's 250 for 385. He's got just shy of 3,500 yards, 33 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, 65% completion percentage. He's averaging 316 yards a game. The biggest question going into this game, Jess, is can Caleb Williams be stopped, or can you even contain what he is about to do tonight at 7:30 in the Coliseum?
Yeah, I mean, Notre Dame has shown that they have a track record of shutting down or containing some very good passing offenses. I know Ohio State was game 1, but look at what Ohio State has done game 2, game 3, game 4, game 5, game 6, game 7, game 8. They're one of the best passing offenses in the country. Drake May, very similar numbers to Caleb Williams, like almost identical. I was looking at them last night, actually. Like they are scary identical. What did Notre Dame do to Drake May? They contained him, right? And so there's things that you can do to limit a quarterback just completely taking over a game. We know, just like North Carolina, USC is going to move the ball. They're going to complete passes. They're going to get first downs. They're going to score some points. You just can't let it turn into a track meet. And so what does that mean? You have to slow Caleb Williams down with pressure. You have to be able to disguise coverages on the back end. You need to be able to show him one thing and get into another, trick his eyes, make him have to think a little bit. You can't just make it cookie cutter for him. You can't let him just drop back and say, oh, this is exactly what the pre-snap was. Let me just, get to my first and second read, let it rip, and we're going to continue to move the ball. So I need to get creative with their stunts, whether that's bringing 4, maybe even 5, even 6 at times. I like when they bring, the corner blitzes off the edge with Tariq Bracy. I think you have to utilize that in this game. But most importantly, like I said, the secondary has to do things to shut down the pass game and give him different looks, disguises, right? Maybe you show one thing pre-snap, you jump into another thing once you snap the ball. Maybe one side of the field you're playing man, maybe the other side of the field you're playing a zone concept. Maybe you do a little Viking, or what I know as Viking coverage, where you drop your defensive ends into the flats and you blitz your linebackers off the edge. Just simple things like that, right? If you're going to bring 4, find ways to bring 4 in a different way. If you're going to bring 5, find ways to stunt and get to the quarterback. And again, the number one thing for me is you got to be able to create an interception. I think if they can create 2 interceptions, oh my gosh, I'll be the happiest guy in the world, but I'll settle for 1. None, I won't be a happy camper. This secondary has proven that they can take the ball away in the back half of the season. It's something they struggle with in the first half of the season, but they need to create a turnover today. I don't care how you do it. You need to take the ball out of Caleb Williams' hands somehow.
I could not agree more. And everybody in the chat, everybody that's going to be watching the Watch Show with us today, myself included, I have to remind myself of this, right? Caleb Williams is going to make some plays where you're just like, dang. Like
this is a 10-1 team, a Heisman really quarterback. This is a team that could get into the playoffs here potentially. Yes. This is a very big game for USC. This is a very good team. Like they're gonna make good plays. People have to be able to accept those things.
And on the flip side, Notre Dame has to be able to respond to that. Caleb Williams is going to make some sort of a jaw-dropping play, whether it's picking up a 3rd and long, scrambling out and just throwing a rifle to a wide open guy or a tightrope on the side. Something's going to happen where you're just like, you have got to be kidding me, right? They have to be able to respond in a positive manner. Absolutely.
And that's what Marcus Freeman talks about with the mental toughness. And that's what has to separate Notre Dame in this game is they have to be mentally tough to bounce back. It's you wipe your slate clean, you take a punch, but you throw a punch back. That's got to be Notre Dame's motto today. They can't lay on the canvas when they get punched. They have to stand up and maybe take another punch, but they got to be able to throw punches back at some point as well.
Well, and I think a lot of that goes to, and we're going to get into the USC defense here in a second, but not only does the defense have to wipe the slate clean, but USC is going to score points, right? They're going to score. I mean, if they goose egg USC, you might as well just throw Notre Dame into the playoff, okay?
We're streaking at that point, Vince. Yeah. If there's a goose egg by USC, you and I will hold hands.
Oh, God.
And run down campus together.
That would be something else. You might want to stay inside for that. But, no. Things are going to happen that are not pro Notre Dame, whether it's the refs, whether it's the USC offense, whatever. To me, one of the biggest signs in this game is, can the Notre Dame offense respond, right? Can they match a score with a score, right? That's going to be huge in this game because, like I said, USC is going to score.
That's
okay?
Vince, you bring up a very good point there, and it's not something that I've thought about, but it's a huge aspect of this game. You can't yet let USC compile scores. You got to be able to, if they score, you don't, respond with a field goal, respond with a touchdown, whatever it might be, but you can't let USC rip off 14, 21 points in a row. That you're going to find yourself in a very big hole, and this Notre Dame offense that's not their specialty. They're not built it's around a big comeback. They're built around getting ahead, controlling the tempo of the game, and keeping it a relatively close game.
Absolutely. They're not built to be a comeback team. If they're down 14 or 21, it's game over. And I hate to say that about Notre Dame, but that's how I feel. And that would be great if they prove me wrong. But being down that much, I just don't see this offense being built to come back from that. So you have to match your scores. You have to match them with something. You have to stay within a possession, maybe two, in order to keep this game a viable win for Notre Dame. That's the bottom line. So still talking about this USC offense, Jess, they're averaging, believe it or not, over 180 yards on the ground, which does that worry you at all about this team? No? Okay, why not?
No. Their run game reminds me a lot of the Big 12, right? It's
sure.
USC, you got to have some sort of run game, right? You can't sit back and throw it 60 times a game. You have to be able to establish and pick up the rhythm of, running the ball. But USC, like when Lincoln Riley played in the Big 12, you're not going against good defenses. And I'm sorry to say, but Notre Dame is a top 25 defense in the country. And I don't think USC has sniffed anyone close to a complete defense like that. And so I don't think they're going to, they're probably going to run between, I think goal would keep them under 100 yards ultimately, right? And so I think that's a very accomplishable stat for this Notre Dame defense. I think they've gone against better running attacks and been able to kind of, handle their own / kind of get exploited a little bit. But we know USC's that's not their main goal. Their main goal is to pass the ball. So I'm not worried about the run game. I think I'm more worried about what Caleb Williams can do with his feet if the pocket breaks down. You got to have, similar to Drake May, similar to CJ Stroud. We saw a lot of times against CJ Stroud where they had things covered and the defensive line just couldn't get CJ Stroud down. And so not allowing Caleb Williams to scramble and complete, that's the run game I'm more worried about, is Caleb Williams extending the play with his legs and that kind of situation. So I think that is, as a defense, what I would be more concerned about. But like I said, I wish I would have saved this tweet because I like a lot of tweets and I always wish I'm going to use that on the show. But, I think you could make the claim that USC's average opponent defensive rank is somewhere in the 60s or 70s. They don't go against good defenses. The Pac-12 doesn't have, great defense. And I think Notre Dame's physicality on the defensive line, the inside tackles that they have, the outside rush with Foskey, this is the best defensive line that they're going to face. And I don't think they're going to want to get into running the ball. They're going to want to stick to passing the ball. So in a roundabout answer, I am not worried about the run game.
No, that's great. And I think one of the keys for this Notre Dame defense is you have to make USC one-dimensional, right? And even though that one dimension that you want to make them is the passing game, and that's what they do best, you want to make them one-dimensional because it's a lot easier to defend a one-dimensional offense than it is, somebody that can run the ball and pass the ball at will.
Right. Look at North Carolina State and North Carolina last night. North Carolina State would line 3 different defensive linemen up and drop 8 into coverage. And you can do that when you take away the run game. And obviously with a pass game like that, dropping 8 is going to be so beneficial. You're just clogging up so many lanes. So if you can get into 2nd and 10, 3rd and 10, don't be surprised if Notre Dame is dropping, 7, potentially 8 guys into coverage. And that happens, like you said, with being one-dimensional. But if you want to shut down USC and make them one-dimensional, and even if that one dimension is pass, you're setting yourself up for a better play on the back end because you can drop more guys into coverage.
100% agree with that. 100% agree with that. I hate to say make Caleb Williams beat you because he has every ability to do that, right? But it is paramount for Notre Dame to force USC to do certain things, right? You can't just, as a defense, you can't just go in and play off of what USC is doing. You do have to dictate, to the best of your ability, you have to dictate some things to USC. You've got to show them some different looks. You've got to show them some different fronts. You've got to bring pressure from areas where you haven't brought pressure before. You've got to do some things to make Caleb Williams think twice about where he's going with the football and what he's going to do pre-snap as well as post-snap. And you hit the nail on the head for me. I'm not worried about their traditional run game. I'm worried about Caleb Williams' feet, because when he gets outside the pocket, he makes plays, whether it's with his he's always looking downfield when he's outside the pocket and behind the line of scrimmage. And he can throw. He's one of the best throwers off platform that I've seen in college football this year. And if we're just going off of a talent standpoint and what you're able to do, what God gave you on attached to your right shoulder, right? Caleb Williams is one of the best in the country. And that's why he's a Heisman candidate. But he doesn't have that Heisman moment yet. Hopefully he doesn't get it tonight. Like, that's the goal. Like, if I'm Notre Dame, it's like, okay, Caleb Williams cannot have his Heisman moment tonight. That cannot happen, right? He was on the verge of having a Heisman moment last week against UCLA, but it's UCLA. Nobody outside of California really cared about that game. People care about this game. And a lot of eyes are going to be on this game. It's at night. It's one of the only games that really matter at night. This is going to be one of the best games in college football. Everybody's eyes are going to be on it. This is his opportunity to make his case for being the Heisman Trophy winner, and this is also Notre Dame's opportunity to make their case that he's not. He's going to win or lose the Heisman Trophy tonight. That I think that's accurate.
Yeah, so you're saying a solid performance seals that ticket. This is a very important weekend for a lot of quarterbacks. CJ Stroud, Caleb Williams, Drake May. And I agree with you. You can't. This is the signature win that USC needs to put on their, on their season, the exclamation point.
Yes.
And, knock on some wood here. It's been 5 years for USC. That's not a good feeling and a good taste, I'm sure, out there in Southern California for the lifelong, USC fans. This is a rivalry that means a lot to a lot of people. USC travels well to Notre Dame when they come out. Like, this is a very important game. And I know USC and that administration football program is not proud of the fact that they have not beat, Notre Dame in 5 years now. And this is on their home turf. This is for a potential, college football playoff spot. This is a resume booster. It's that 12th data point on the season. This game means a lot. They know all that. Caleb Williams knows all that. He knows that if he wants, most importantly, his team to have a good shot, that he needs to perform well. And then on a personal level, for his Heisman, hopefuls, he needs to play well as too. So it is going to be a shootout, Vince. And I think this is what is exciting. This game hasn't meant much in the last, it means much, but in terms of national relevance, this game hasn't been on the stage as what it used to be. This game used to, like Michigan and Ohio State, this game has in the past has meant a lot, right? Like there's a lot riding on this game. And so I think that this could be his biggest game of his career. You could say that. And I think I can say that with confidence it is his biggest game of his career. And he needs to show that in the prime time, he can deliver for his team.
Absolutely correct. And like I said, this is either going to make or break his Heisman candidacy. I think he'll go to New York regardless. But I think this will make or break whether he wins or not, because this is going to be an opportunity for a lot of fans, or not a fan, a lot of voters to see him for the first time, right? Or at least from a start to finish first time. I mean, USC has played a lot of games. A lot of them have been late at night. A lot of them have not been marquee games, right? This is a marquee game. This is when the Heisman candidates are supposed to shine. So you're going to have CJ Stroud going up against Michigan. He'll have his opportunity in about 63 minutes to make his case. And then later on tonight, you're going to have your opportunity to make your case if you're Caleb Williams. So it's going to be very interesting. The defense has a tall task in front of them, but it should be a lot of fun to watch. I think Notre Dame can step up to the plate, but we shall see.
Yeah, I saw it nice. Sorry, before we jump right in, I know I'm always
No. You're beautiful. Go.
I like the comment by Doug Hampton in the chat. This matchup is going to be very similar to North Carolina. I think that is completely true. I just think that I don't know. I don't know if I can say that USC's offense is even a little bit better, because May and Caleb Williams have like identical stats, and I'm not kidding you. Passing yards, touchdowns, interceptions, QBR, they're like very, 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 very similar, like 1% off maybe. I just think at this point in the season, USC's offense is obviously a little bit further along, maybe a little bit developed. Notre Dame was fortunate enough to get USC North Carolina earlier in the season. But this is a very comparable matchup because of who Caleb Williams is and his ability to move like Drake May could. And that's why Notre Dame won that game, because they shut down Drake May and they shut down Drake May's legs, and they need to do the exact same things today. So I would find, I would go back to that game plan, combine it, with maybe the Clemson game plan, and come up with a hybrid game plan of what it's going to take to shut down this USC offense. Not shut down, but slow them up enough to win.
Right. I don't think, because look, we're realistic. You're not going to be able to shut down this offense, right? It's not going to happen. But you can slow them down. You can potentially keep them in the low 30s to high 20s. That is reasonable. That's absolutely reasonable. So but that's what this thing is going to hinge on. The other thing it's going to hinge on is whether Notre Dame can score points against this defense. And so let's quickly talk about this USC defense. They are giving up over 400 yards per game when you combine passing and rushing. 257 yards passing, 147 yards rushing. So just over 400 yards per game. So, Jess, I'm giving you Tommy Rees's job, which maybe people in the chat would actually prefer, but I'm giving it to you for the next few minutes. If you were the OC at Notre Dame, how do you attack this defense?
Run the ball, and run the ball somewhere. USC is the 58th run defense in the country right now. They give up 150 yards per game, Vince, and that's against a rushing attack that is nowhere near what Notre Dame can do with their run game. So Notre Dame has to be able to run the ball similar to what they did against Clemson, and they have to get uncomfortable with being uncomfortable, meaning if the run game is working and you're getting 3 or 4 a pop, keep handing the ball off. Don't beat yourself. I don't care. Remember against Clemson when they ran the ball 10 times in a row? I don't care if you run the ball 10 times in a row if it's working. Make USC stop this run game. They are not a good run defense, and they've played against bad running attacks. So continue to run the ball down their throat. Continue to use your physicality as an offensive line and dominate. Make them stop your running backs. You have a rotation of running backs that constantly stay fresh. That's a huge advantage when you're really trying to out-physical some teams. You need to run the ball, and run the ball some more. And then when you need a quick play or you need, maybe some big yardage, throw in a play action and hit Michael Mayer up the seam, because I guarantee you those USC linebackers and defensive linemen and safeties are going to be cheating the run. And that's all you need is one step. Michael Mayer gets his big body in front of you, runs down the middle of the field, down the seam one-on-one. And again, we're talking about the best tight end in the country. I have all the faith in the world as long as Pine puts it right on his hands.
Well, and he doesn't even need to put it on his hands, because we know Michael Mayer is going to catch it either way. So, no, look, this is to steal a line from Brian, the stars need to be stars, right? I mean, Michael Mayer needs to have a game, and the running backs need to have a game. The offensive line needs to have a game. They need to. Running the ball is obviously going to be one of the most important parts of this offense. If they can't run the ball, it's game over. I mean, if that's who you are, that is your identity. We are in game 12. Running the football is your identity. Play action is your identity. When they drop back to throw the ball, other guys are going to have to step up, whether it's Deion Colsey, whether it's Lorenzo Styles, whether it's Braden Lenzy, whether it's Chris Tyree, whoever the ball is headed to, somebody's going to need to step up. And I don't think any of us would say any of the wide receivers are stars on this team. So they are supporting cast. And the supporting cast, you need a full team effort on the offensive side in order to respond to what USC is going to do offensively and to keep your defense off the field for a little while. The defense can't be on the field the entire game trying to defend Caleb Williams in this offense. They can't. They're going to need rest. They're going to need time on the bench.
Right. Control that possession.
Absolutely.
Get first downs. Move the chain.
And look, if there's an opportunity and you see it where Braden Lenzy's in zero coverage and he's got an opportunity to have a one-play drive for 80 yards, you take it.
Take your kill shots calculated.
That will alone energize the defense, right? Even if they're on the field for 2 long drives, split up by an 80-yard touchdown to Braden Lenzy, that's okay, because they'll be energized by the fact that the score is either tied or you're winning. right?
Yeah,
And
nothing
so,
energizes a defense more than knowing that your offense has your
yes,
back and they're returning the counter punches. It gives your defense
yes.
life. There's nothing worse than a team scoring and then your offense goes out there and puts up a dud. You just got to have your defenses back.
Yep. And there's going to be opportunities against this team. Okay. There's going to be opportunities in the pass game. There's going to be opportunities in the run game. Again, did you pack your attitude from South Bend to California? That to LAX, as they say, right? Did you pack it? Because if you did, then USC is going to face something that they haven't faced all year. The toughest defense they've played is Oregon State. Okay. Notre Dame's defense is better than Oregon State. Respect to the Pac-12 people that may be listening, the people out on the West Coast. Notre Dame has a better defense than Oregon State. This is a defense that's going to punch you in the mouth. This is an offense that is going to punch you in the mouth, right? USC hasn't faced that this year. You can say that Utah is physical, and that's why they lost that game.
They still scored in the 40s.
Utah is not as physical as Notre Dame. They're not. There's no team on the West Coast that is as physical as Notre Dame. So let's see what happens if Notre Dame pack their attitude. So
I like what Stymie said here. The more tight ends that Dallas put on the field, the better their offense performed. I'm just saying he's in reference to the Dallas and Giants game on Thursday night, and that was true. The Dallas in the first half tried to get cutesy with some passes, and in the second half they said, "All right, we're just going to put we have one of the best offensive lines in the NFL." We're going to load up our big guys, and we're going to start running the ball. We're going to make you stop us. And I know that Sean Stiers does not like the 12, 13, 14 personnel, but in a game like this, it has its benefits. The only thing I'm saying is if you're going to see that, I'd like to see a mirror of the two back sets, meaning like a 1-to-1 ratio. If you run one play 13 set, I would like to see a 22 set, complementing that. And the reason why I like that is because you can get into a very, physical power run game with your offensive line and tight end, sure, but then you can also do things with your backs and creating, motions and getting guys' eyes going in different ways and having two different running backs on the field, I think is very beneficial. So I'm okay with them getting into those big boy personnel sets. I just also need to see some, it be reflected on the two back sets as well, Vince.
All right, Jess. We have an interview to play that Sean Stiers was able to do with USC reporter R.J. Abadia. And he was able to pull this off before he left for the Bahamas. So he is going to take Jesse's seat, literally and figuratively. And we are going to play that interview for you. A lot of really good information here from RJ, coming from the deep, dark depths of his house. You'll notice that he apparently doesn't own a light bulb, but it is a very, very good interview. So we are going to bring that to you right now. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this interview with RJ Abadia and Sean Stiers.
It's time to talk a little Notre Dame USC, and we've got our old friend RJ Abadia with us from USCfootball.com. How's it going, RJ?
It's going great. It's that time of year where if you find yourself covering a football team playing meaningful games, it's the fun. It's the fun of the year. It's the fun of the calendar, without question.
That's right. Going to Thanksgiving weekend, and everybody's got something to play for now. It's hard to beat, I think. And I think that's kind of part of the fun. We haven't had a Notre Dame USC football game where there's really been, the stakes aren't quite as high for Notre Dame, obviously, but they're still playing for potentially a chance to get into a New Year's Six Bowl. There's plenty for both teams on the line, and they're both going to be highly ranked for the first time in a while. So I think it's pretty exciting. I don't know what you think.
Yeah, I mean, we just went through a version of that with the USC UCLA game. It had been a long time since both those teams had been where they were going into that game. And I think, it's not a conference game, and USC having clinched a spot in the Pac-12 championship game. So the stakes are not quite as high, although obviously USC, until they're not in contention, they're in contention for the playoff, you know? And so a win, you talk about this stretch of the season with UCLA, Notre Dame, and looking like Oregon, although still to be determined, but that's 3 top 16 playoff teams that USC would be playing. And if they were to win, now you're talking about a 12-1 USC team who's beaten 3 straight top 16 playoff teams. I think that's a long way off, as we'll get into in a second. I think that's going to be a big ask. But if you get on the other side of that, I don't think there's any question you're talking about a USC team in the playoff.
Right. No, I completely agree. I completely agree with that. That's, we've kind of been talking about, in our shows, different, those scenarios, whether it's USC or LSU, you've got all these teams, kind of lurking out there. And Tennessee losing obviously helps everybody out, that it was kind of stacked up behind them. I think everyone was surprised by that, for one. But so we're sitting here at the end of Lincoln Riley's first season there at USC, and he's obviously done what he went there to do. I mean, if the guy ran for mayor of Los Angeles right now, do you think that he'd win?
Well, depends on the precinct.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
he didn't make a good. There's a good chunk of Los Angeles who's not thrilled with him right now. But what he has done, really, to sum it up in the best way possible, is they are a Lincoln Riley team. In a very short amount of time, that is who and what USC is, for better and for worse. And in this day and age, to be honest, it's largely for better. Like, if you look at the profiles of the top college football playoff ranked teams, almost all of them have an elite offense. And the truly elite, I think, are the ones that couple elite offense with elite defense, but that's a short list. I think in this day and age, especially if you just look in the Pac-12, you see teams with elite offense that try to get opportunistic defenses to do just enough to win. And that's essentially who USC is. And it's worked. I mean, you can't argue with the fact that they're 10-1. And Lincoln Riley, he has never lost more than 2 games in a season. And that result is still in play, in theory, at this stage and this late in the season. So I think it'd be hard to call this anything but a significant success in year one.
Yeah. I mean, the kind of turnaround that they've had, obviously. What maybe has impressed you the most in covering him over the course of this first season?
I think by far the culture. I think that the chemistry, I think outsiders, including me before I started covering USC, I think there's a lot of perception that what was holding USC back was a lot of intangibles, a lot of character deficiencies, a lot of ways in which they weren't as mentally tough as they were talented. And there have been numerous occasions and numerous examples all season long where that character and toughness was tested, and they've answered. They've had good answers for it pretty much every time that they've gone out there. And that's not something we've been able to say about a USC team. And I don't think when Lincoln Riley came in, it was something that people latched onto as an expectation. I think they knew that he was going to take the offense to another level. I think they knew that there would be winning a lot more than last year. But if you look at that game last night, a bunch of the headlining plays were made by transfers, guys who were here. I mean, some as late as the summer, guys who arrived June and July, and they're making championship plays for you. And the thing is, I think the last time we talked, right, this is a team that had played no games together before September.
Exactly.
They don't have years of common battles, common experience to draw on in these tough moments. And they've had answers far more often than they haven't. And the other thing that's been really interesting is this staff has also not played our guys, their guys. There have been a number of returners on the USC team who, on their own timetable, guys like wide receiver Michael Jackson, Josh Follow, tight end for USC, a bunch of guys, Kyron Hudson as a receiver. I'm forgetting. I try to name all their receivers, and then there's just so many of them. But Taj Washington and guys on the defensive end too. And what I'm trying to get at, and taking too long to get it, is that this staff has proven that if you work, you will get on the field. And that sounds really simple, and that sounds like something you presume would be the case everywhere, but you and I both know it's not the case everywhere.
That's right. That's
And
absolutely right.
And there has been a real meaning to seeing players play their way onto the field as late as yesterday, as late as the last few weeks, but get meaningful roles. And I'm not talking about garbage time roles. I'm talking about, in the case of Michael Jackson, there have been games where there was a game, the Utah game, which they narrowly lost. They brought him in cold in the fourth quarter, ran a play for him, and he scored what nearly became the winning touchdown. Last week, last night, Darwin Barlow, running back transfer from a year ago, so before Lincoln Riley arrived, has kind of been a forgotten guy in that running back room with the emergence of Travis Dye, comes in the fourth quarter and finishes off UCLA's final touchdown drive with 2 strong carries, including a touchdown. No longer Stanford's, but Austin Jones stepping up for Travis Dye after spending most of the season backing him up and putting up 125 yards. There have been cases like that all through the year, and those are the symptoms of a good culture. When you see guys, number one, putting in the work, but number two, being rewarded. I think that has been easily the most impressive part of what's gone on this season.
Well, Riley brought Caleb Williams with him, obviously, from Oklahoma, and he's just torn it up all year. Heisman conversation, the whole thing, had a monster game. We're talking right after the UCLA game, had a monster game against UCLA. I mean, even in their loss to Utah, he had a big game. I'm looking back through it. Is Oregon State, is that the closest thing that he's really had to a bad game this season?
It is, without question. And, I think as a group, that was the first true road game of the season. They had played against Stanford in the equivalent of basically an empty stadium, but that was the first time they went into someplace truly hostile. And as you know, and as you've seen, venue matters. I mean, you can even look at what's happened when Alabama's gone on the road this year.
Yeah.
They've gotten super shaky, super fast, whether you're talking about the Texas game, the Tennessee game, the Ole Miss game, and then, bringing it back. So I think venue really impacted them. I also think Oregon State has been by far the best defense that USC has played. And that is until Notre Dame arrives on Saturday, which is a big part of why I would not even be a little surprised to see Notre Dame get the win.
Well, and that's, we were just talking before we started, and I was kind of thinking this to an extent, it's like you've got UCLA and USC has always played in these years where Notre Dame comes out to the Coliseum. They've always played Notre Dame and UCLA back to back. The order has been reversed in previous years a lot of times, but they play them back to back, and especially now where you're sitting here in late November, that's got to take some kind of a toll, I would think, on a team like USC to have to win a game like they just did against UCLA, and now you've got your other biggest rival, Notre Dame, coming into the Coliseum this week.
Yeah, and as we were saying, it's a toll in years when the stakes are low,
right? But
it's a toll now because Notre Dame is good. UCLA is good. And USC is good. You're playing for big stakes, and that there is a mental and a physical cost at this stage of the season. And obviously it's still, everyone would trade places, right? Everyone would take the problem of being 10-1, of being on the border of pushing into the college football playoff, of clinching a spot in your conference championship game. These are great problems to have. I think when you zero in on the Notre Dame USC game, it's really just a really conspicuous spot in the schedule because, as we were saying before we got on, USC is playing in a championship game, but they're not doing it for 2 weeks, right? So the Notre Dame game has stakes always. There are scenarios where USC pushes into the college football playoff discussion legitimately here in these closing stretches with a win over Notre Dame. So I don't think it's a situation where USC will not be fired up or will not take Notre Dame seriously or will not prep. None of that. But this USC team, especially on the offensive line, is beat up pretty good from this season. And that's an issue when you talk about Notre Dame. And again, part of me is it's a little crazy for me because I'm talking about a team that lost to Stanford, coming in, and
you don't have to tell me. It's like they're sitting here at 8-1. Is it 8-1? I always have to do the math on this because this season has just been so weird, to even conceptualize some different. Yeah, so they're 8-1 in their last 9 games with the loss to Stanford, and there's no one on this side that can figure that out. Yeah,
and trust me, I'm not. As you know from my own background, that's not something I'm disregarding. I'm well aware of how inconceivable that result was, and remains. But again, so much of this is the when of things, and I feel like I almost feel like, I think in the not too distant future, there's going to be a time when this is a conference game, frankly. And we could talk about that at some point. Ooh. But I feel like if USC had to beat Notre Dame to get into the Pac-12 championship game, that's a different feel.
Right.
That's a slightly different, or vice versa, right? If Notre Dame was playing for a situation, playing for a direct result like that. But I just think, and look, USC has answered every challenge this year but one, and that one was a 1-point loss. So I don't want to make it seem like it's a fait accompli or just it's inevitable. I just think this is a big, big ask when you look at the type of football Notre Dame plays and where they fall on the schedule.
What's as someone who covers USC, obviously, what concern level should there be on the USC side / what confidence level should there be on the Notre Dame side when you look at that matchup, Notre Dame's running game against USC's front seven?
Well, that's a very clear strength versus weakness spot, right? And that's the other part of this is that it's not just the quality of team that Notre Dame is, and they're vulnerable. Don't get me wrong. This is not 1988. I recognize that. But the type of good team they are is kind of what creates the concern. UCLA, if you look at their overall profile, you might call them a better team than Notre Dame, but they're not a bad fit for USC.
Yeah.
Even with Zach Charbonnet, USC actually did a really good job defending Zach Charbonnet. They were the first team in 5 games to keep him under 100 yards last night, which played no small role in the victory. So again, USC's they're not just gonna lie over. They're not just gonna bend the knee here at all. But I just think it's just a tough matchup. This is a good time for Notre Dame to be playing USC.
Yeah, I mean,
this is the best way I'd say it.
I don't know how much of the Clemson game you got to watch, but I mean, I'll be honest, after seeing Notre Dame do that to Clemson, I think everyone on this end went, "Ooh, that USC game, it looks a lot different now after seeing that." So go back to Caleb Williams though for a second.
Sure.
Does he, I mean, virtually everything that we've seen from him is good. Again, like the Oregon State game, they still won that game. And as you said, the closest thing that he's had to a bad game. Is there a real weakness that Caleb Williams has?
I think one of the things that's kind of emerged this season is, I guess, his weakness is in excess of one of his biggest strengths. I consider him the least sackable quarterback, not just this season, but one of the least sackable quarterbacks I've ever seen play.
That's what stands out to me.
The amount of times when there have been guys less than an arm's length from him who not only don't bring him down, they don't even touch him. it's amazing. You watch it over and over again, and it's just, I have not seen that. You've got there are Lamar Jacksons and Kyler Murrays and Cam Newtons, and there have been guys absolutely over the years, but I can't think of anyone who has been this difficult to sack. The flip side of that is that there are plays that he extends longer than necessary. And that can lead to sometimes some ill-advised choices, but also what it leads to is an offensive line that's got to block for 10 seconds, anywhere from 5 to 10 times a game.
Yeah.
And that takes a toll. Because other than that, it's pretty tough to shoot holes in his profile. I think the thing that has been, he threw an interception last night, third, I think. I should know this, but I don't. But he came in at, I think he came in at 31 touchdowns to 2 interceptions.
That sounds right.
Elite quarterbacks or coaches are happy with guys who are at 3-1, let alone 10-1, 11-1, 12-1.
Right.
And the thing that stands out about what he's done this year, amongst all the big plays he's made, amongst all the things he's done well, is this team just does not turn the ball over with any frequency, any regularity, which means you've got to get them off the field in 4 downs. And it is really hard to keep this team from gaining at least 10 yards every 4 downs.
Well, you were just touching on their offensive line, and I'm going to give you credit, first of all, because go back to the summer when we talked coming into the season, we were talking about, okay, what are the questions that they have and, all these different things. I brought up USC's offensive line, and they weren't very good last year. And you said, well, they got better. By the end of the season, they were a much better offensive line than they were at the beginning of the season. And here we are now. They're a Joe Moore Award semifinalist. So I guess a couple of things. One, and I'm not trying to take anything away from them, because I haven't, I've watched a few of their games and they look good, and and what you're describing. So I guess the question is 2-part. One, how much better have they looked? But also, how does Williams factor into sort of how much better they look because of all the dimensions that you were just talking about with him?
Well, I think both of those, both things can be true, right? They can be a really good offensive line who has benefited from Lincoln Riley and Caleb Williams. I think both things are accurate. If you look at their numbers, they're giving up pressures on about 36% of the dropbacks, which is not elite low, and it's also not red alert bad, and again, there have been plays conversely where the few times when Caleb Williams has been sacked, it's as much on him as on them. But I think if you look individually, Brett Nealon is the number 2 graded Pro Football Focus center in college football. Andrew Voorhees, who plays left guard right next to him, is the number 3 rated guard. So this is a pretty talented group. This is a good group, and that's really been the big contrast between offense and defense this year for USC, is that Lincoln Riley inherited a pretty good offensive line and one with room for improvement, as you've seen. Defensively, they did not inherit that kind of front seven and that kind of line of scrimmage presence. And that's how the season's played out. An elite offensive line has turned them into an elite offense. A front seven and a defensive line that, even with Tuli Tuipulotu, who's an exceptional player, they don't bring that kind of consistency in terms of generating pressure, in terms of stopping the run. And that's why you kind of have the team that you have at USC.
When you look at Jordan Addison, we haven't even talked about him. Of course, the transfer from Pitt, who has been, the number 1 target for Caleb Williams. Again, he has not been held in check very often. There've really only been a couple of times that's happened. When that has happened, how have those two? I think it's 2 teams maybe. How have they managed to do that?
Well, I don't think there is a book on him. He's not a big guy, but he's very physical. There have been a number of plays where he's made catches and had to fight for that last 2 or 3 yards to maybe get in the end zone, and he's won his share of those fights. So he is a very physical player, but he's not a big player. So, it's the old, it's pick your poison in a certain sense, right? I think teams that have pressed and been physical with him and teams that have gotten Caleb Williams out of sync are the teams that can move the needle with him. But he's just, he's an amazing route runner, and he has great hands. He went his first, I think that streak's still alive. He's now over 46, 47 catches without a drop yet this season. Wow. He hasn't dropped a pass. And coming in some astronomical number, if you just give me 1 second. I gotta juice my laptop here so we don't we don't go completely.
You don't want the laptop to die in the middle.
I just noticed that the battery thing, so we gotta fight. We got a thrilling climax here. Okay. Okay. Now wait, is this thing on? What are we doing?
Trust me. The Boston College guy last week had a baby sleeping in his arms, when we were doing the interview. So you plugging in a computer is nothing at this point. So.
Yeah, no, I don't. What world are we even living in at this point? Who can tell? All right. Well, I'm just gonna hope for the best here at this point. But no, with Jordan Addison, he's just an all business football player. He's physical. He's an amazing route runner. And he's in a great offense. It's very difficult. And I will say the other silver lining that even Lincoln Riley kind of referenced over the past few weeks when Jordan Addison wasn't available is that they got a lot less predictable, because they're, like I said, with Michael Jackson and some of the other guys, they're going to throw to the open guy. And if that's Jordan Addison, that's who it's going to be. But you don't see a lot of force feeding in this offense. So now if you're a defense and you do your job on Jordan Addison, but they've got 4 other receivers out in the pattern, you need your second, third, fourth, and fifth best cover guys to cover. And if one of them doesn't, the odds that Caleb Williams is going to find that guy is pretty good.
It's pretty. I was just thinking about how Notre Dame lines up to defend that, and it's. I don't know. It's going to be very interesting. They haven't seen, they've seen a couple good quarterbacks, but they've seen nothing like that. They've seen nothing like this system. They've seen nothing like what USC is going to throw out there, from a receiver standpoint. So it's a really curious matchup for sure. And this is a rivalry that goes back forever, and it feels like where these two programs are right now, like this could kind of go back to being a national rivalry here for the next few years, the way things are shaping up.
Well, I think Notre Dame's record in the past 5 seasons speaks for itself. And I think also it's not a coincidence, but I think their recruiting in the past 5 years kind of speaks for itself. And with Lincoln Riley at USC, I think the football, the offense is going to be up at that level. I think we just kind of arrive at the true crossroads for Lincoln Riley. The last bridge for him to cross basically is, can he recruit elite defensive talent and build a defense that matches what he's done on offense? Yeah. That's the final threshold. That's the thing that he couldn't do at Oklahoma. That's kind of the ceiling that he hit there, right? Yep. Is that he put up some unbelievable teams that didn't lose. I mean, they won. They never lost more than twice in a season. But when you get up against that elite team in college football playoff games, it goes south quickly if you don't have answers on both sides of the ball.
That's right. Notre Dame knows that all too well themselves. That's,
absolutely.
That's the bottom line. Yep.
So yeah, I think it's trending in that exciting direction. I really do think. I think it's not it's not that far away from a scenario where maybe a year from now, this is a top 10 matchup.
Yeah, I think it
it's
very
not far
well.
from being one as we speak, right?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it's not far off. That's for sure. I saw, and again, we talked in the summer. It was maybe just within a few days after the big USC UCLA announcement to the Big Ten is when we talked. I think it was last week that not so fast, like UCLA might not be able to be a part of this. Do you have any insight, like exactly what is going on with them and what could keep them out of this deal?
Well, the level that's occurring is the University of California level.
Okay.
You got to remember that that's the huge difference that everyone knows, but it comes into play at this moment. USC is a private school.
Right.
They are not bound by an institution or an organization larger than themselves. Right. UCLA is a UC school. They are part of the state of California, right? So there's a board of regents that runs the UCs, and it is not a situation where UCLA is completely autonomous. Now, if you're asking me where would you bet, where's the smart money, I think to the extent that UCLA is committed to making this move, there's a path. But it's not at this moment, it's not guaranteed. It's not the no-brainer that it is for USC. I think, again, my sense of this in the long run being inside the next 5 years, I think Stanford, UCLA, Oregon, and Washington are all going to be part of a super conference Big Ten scenario. I defer to you, as always, with issues about Notre Dame. I think at some point in that window, Notre Dame's going to make that choice as well. It might be maybe a little longer than that, a little shorter. I don't know. I think that's where college football's going, and I would be shocked to find out that the UC regents kept UCLA from that emerging kind of NFL level to super conference tier at the end of the day.
Yeah. As far as Notre Dame is concerned, the biggest chip that fell in their favor here, within the last month, was when they decided they're going to expand the playoff to 12 teams, keeping that access, making sure that there is more access to the playoff as an independent was big. The next piece they have to solve now is what's going to happen with this TV contract. Are they going to be able to keep NBC, or will CBS or Fox get in the mix? And are they willing to pony up enough that it keeps Notre Dame's attention? Because obviously the $100 million a year that all these Big Ten schools, Notre Dame's not just going to jump it. Like, if it's the difference, I think now this is just me based on everything we've heard about their independence and what it means to them over the years. Like, if it's the difference between $75 million and $100 million, if they can get $75 million, I think they're perfectly fine with that, because it allows them to keep their independence. But do other dominoes fall that force them closer? Like, do other schools start jumping? Because I don't know about you, but everyone in this part of the country was sure pretty surprised when all of a sudden here's USC and UCLA jumping. So that's the next thing, I think, is do other schools start jumping, and does that force Notre Dame's hand to some extent? So, but again, having the access to the playoff is huge for them, and having that independent TV partner is the next biggest piece for them. So that's what we've got to and I think we've got about 3 years before that, the current contract is up. So
yeah, well, look, that's the enviable, perfect position, right? I mean, you still, it shouldn't be lost on anybody that it's 2022 and that there is a single college football team that's got its own network.
Right.
Like, that's not a little thing. Like,
right.
That's a big deal. First off, like you said, and I'm not a TV revenue expert, So I would, again, I'm not going to go too far out on this ledge, but in my line of thinking, if you've got your own network, you got to be pretty healthy financially. That deal has to be bringing in something pretty competitive to make it work, right? And if you are the only school that plausibly gets a deal like that, you're not giving that up unless you absolutely have to give it up. And I think that playoff component is the part that matters the most. But I also think, like, even with a 12-team playoff, if the two super conference situation emerges, maybe not explicitly, but maybe implicitly, even with 12, it becomes a tougher situation for Notre Dame.
Right. That's where it gets sticky. Like if you, like what you're saying, yeah. And like I said, other dominoes falling. If it comes to where it is, everything's funneling to those two super conferences, like you say, then that's a completely different scenario for Notre Dame at that point. I think that there are probably, like some conferences that'll probably be willing to let Notre Dame at least keep a pie, piece of that pie, assuming, they have a TV contract and that kind of, just like when they joined up with the ACC a couple of years ago, they all said, okay, well, you can join, but we're getting part of your TV revenue. And Notre Dame was like, well, we want to play football this season, so that's fine. But yeah, you're right. The super conference, the idea of the two super conferences, that's the game changer for everybody, especially for Notre Dame. You're right.
Yeah.
Well, RJ, it's been great catching up with you as always. And like I said, I think we're all excited to see a very meaningful on both sides Notre Dame USC football game this weekend. Should be a lot of fun.
It should be great. Always great talking to you, Sean. Have a happy Thanksgiving and enjoy the game on Saturday. I think it's going to be a great one.
Absolutely. Thanks, RJ.
All right. RJ Abadia sitting in with Sean Stiers, talking a little USC for us from the West Coast. Apparently it was nighttime over there, or they're conserving energy because it's California. I don't know. But it was a good interview nonetheless. So thanks everybody for sticking around. We only have about 20 minutes left, Jess. So we've got to kind of fly through some of this, but it is rapid fire time, everybody. So strap in because this is a game day rapid fire segment here. And we're going to jump right in. So without further ado, number one, depending on who you talk to, Notre Dame is playing its fourth rivalry game this season, Jesse. And they weren't talking to me because I don't believe that. But buy or sell Southern Cal being Notre Dame's biggest rival?
I am 100% buy on this. This game in terms of meaningfulness, and the amount of years that they've played each other. Like you said earlier, they've played consecutively except for World War II and the COVID year. So we're talking about an all-time series here of 50, 37, and 5. That's 92 matchups. When Notre Dame's going to USC, obviously it's at the end of the year, so it's a very meaningful game. But even when USC comes to Notre Dame in October, it is still a very meaningful game. So I think this game is the biggest rivalry that Notre Dame has because of the fact that it has the most impact and the longevity that both teams have played each other.
I completely agree with you. I think this is one of the best rivalries in college football. I think it is Notre Dame's biggest rival. Some people are going to say that team up north. I'm going to heartily disagree with that. They have not played that team nearly as much as they've played USC. I also think that there's more respect in this rivalry than there is in the other rivalry. So this one's big for me. It put Notre Dame on the map as well nationally because they were going and playing coast to coast because they were not in a conference. And that is Michigan's fault to a great degree. So this is a much bigger rivalry for Notre Dame. It's one that they make sure does not come off the schedule, unlike other rivalries. And so, yeah, this is by far the biggest rivalry for Notre Dame. And frankly, it's the biggest one for me as well. So I'm excited for this game. This is one of my favorite games of the year. And this isn't part of rapid fire, but I'm still going to ask you this question. If and when USC moves to the Big Ten, Jess, what are your thoughts about having this game as the last game of the year every year, home and away?
It's a hard question because the reason why I don't like this being the last game of the year, home or away, assuming USC potentially joins the Big Ten, is because of what we see in the Big Ten right now. We see Michigan, Ohio State, for lack of better terms, loading up on the front end of their schedule, taking advantage of what I would consider a weaker conference, and then pitting two 11-0 teams against each other at the end of the season. With this playoff format, I don't like it because then it becomes an argument of, well, should a one-loss Michigan get in or should a one-loss Ohio State get in? Well, if you would have played this game at the beginning of the year, you can build up your resume and play towards the end. But when you only play your meaningful game at the end of the season and you lose your only meaningful game, I have a hard time saying that you also deserve to be in the playoffs. But obviously the playoff is expanding. They're going to let more teams in. And so if we were talking about this current playoff format, I wouldn't like it for that reason, because it's Vince, you have to end the season well. You can't, if you're going to lose a game, it's better to lose the game early in the season and win the rest of them. But when you lose on your last game, that's the last thing that the committee sees, and it's a potential to leave you out because of that, right? And so if we go to this expanded playoff format, sure, I don't care when you play it because there's an opportunity for more teams to get in. But in this current playoff format, I don't like playing the game at the end of the season for a lot of the reasons I just went into.
Very interesting. I never thought about it from a playoff aspect. So that's a very good way to look at it. I like it at the end of the season because, frankly, I'm excited to see USC come down here the last weekend of November and play in South Bend, because I don't think they can handle it. And I think that would be a huge advantage to Notre Dame. So I like it, but I see where you're coming from. But I also, looking at it from your point of view, you're looking at it as, okay, well, if Notre Dame loses this game, it's going to really greatly affect their playoff possibilities. I get that. I look at it, I guess, from the opposite side of the coin, whereas this is a meaningful game. It's an important game. It's the last game of the season. A lot is riding on it. It can propel Notre Dame into a better spot if they win the game. So there's just a lot riding on. I like games that mean something, and having that as the last game of the season, I think more often than not that game would actually mean something. So I think that would be a lot of fun.
Definitely.
But hey, I like that we disagreed. That's good stuff. All right. Second question. Sticking with the rivalry topic, your top 3 college football rivalries are what?
Oh, man. So I'm going to give you my top 3, but I don't want to give them in any particular order because I think that at that point it gets a little bit tough. The ones that definitely belong in there for me are Ohio State and Michigan, Notre Dame and USC. And then after that, it becomes a toss-up between Alabama and Auburn, and Texas and Oklahoma. But I think for the sake of rivalries, man, I'm going to have to go with Auburn and Alabama as my third. I know a lot of people are going to probably say Navy and Army, which I respect. That's obviously a rivalry game. But unfortunately, Navy and Army to me don't bring enough of a national presence. These teams aren't historically, at least in the last, when I've been alive, are competing for national championships, playoff spots, etc. I think USC, Notre Dame, Auburn, Alabama, and Michigan and Ohio State often have large implications on, the national championship, the playoffs, and New Year's 6 bowl games. So those are the top 3 for me.
For me, and we kind of talked about this a little bit, I think it was on yesterday's show, but my top 3, Notre Dame, USC, definitely. Michigan, Ohio State, that's right up there. And probably one of the main reasons for that is that we live around here. So it's like we're immersed in it. And so it feels
unfortunately
really big. I know, right? The third spot is a toss-up for me as well.
It's the hardest one.
The Red River rivalry. I think Texas, Oklahoma, I really do enjoy that game. It's earlier in the season most of the time, which is interesting. So it's not like on rivalry weekend like a lot of these games are. So it's earlier in the season. I like the fact that they play in the Cotton Bowl, that they like half the stadium is burnt orange, half the stadium is red. Like there's a lot of pageantry that comes with that game. So I do dig that game. But it's hard to go away from Army-Navy as well. There's the pomp and circumstance of Army-Navy, the bigger picture of it, I think, is what makes it a great rivalry game.
Yes.
I watch it every year because it's literally the only game on TV that weekend, which I think is actually really smart.
Very smart
by them to be the only show in town that weekend. So I think that's actually really, really smart. From a football standpoint, it's not a great game. I mean, it's a great game for them, but it doesn't have like national implications.
It's a pride and honor game.
Absolutely.
And it's amazing to see. And like a lot of people, what Anthony Solomon kind of got into in the chat here is we have so many veterans in the country, and it means so much to our veterans. And that is another huge aspect of it, regardless of, talent of football. It's just, there's a lot of honor, respect. And in these guys, these veterans, they feel, a part of this, watching this game. So it's tough. That third spot is very tough.
It is tough. And I have no problem putting Army Navy there. The biggest issue for me is the national implications. There's just not any, but it's a big game for so many other reasons. I mean, the president of the United States goes to that game, sits on both sides. You know what I mean? Like, it's a big deal. It's a huge deal. Okay, off topic. Who is Adam's biggest rivalry? Like, who's your biggest rival? St. Joe?
When we were playing, or at least when I was playing, St. Joe was up there. But man, the city schools, it meant something. There was 4 of us at the time. There still is at the time. You got Clay, Washington, Riley, Adams. So it's hard to say, because I would say like all of those, like the battle of the city teams, you could almost count as one big rivalry.
Right.
But outside of that, it was St. Joe, because and I don't mean any offense to anyone that potentially has any connections to St. Joe in this chat, but it's just a different kind of atmosphere over there. It's a different kind of mentality over there. Different clientele. It just meant, and historically Adams was bad, and we changed the momentum when I was there. And there was a lot of chalking by St. Joe, who didn't necessarily, rightfully so. They spanked us for so many years. But I would tell you, Vince, the highlight of my high school career was Shaq Van taking in the touchdown to beat St. Joe our junior year as time expires, and then beating St. Joe again on their senior day, my senior year. They lined us up on senior day, thought they were going to beat us. And again, my boy Shaq Van went for like 400 on the ground or something stupid.
425.
Burned up their turf. I think his feet were on fire. I know I'm getting long-winded, but it is St. Joe.
I had to ask. And nobody in the chat cares about that particular conversation, but I did, so that's all. All right. Scale of 1 to 10, Jess, that this is the last time that we see Isaiah Foskey and Michael Mayer in a Notre Dame uniform.
It's a solid 9 out of 10. Both of these guys, Foskey did sit again, come back again this year, which was a little bit surprising to a lot of people. I think he's got to go this year. He's proved a lot, and there's no reason. I think he's proved enough to get his, high level draft grade, draft prospect. And we know Michael Mayer. And to me, Michael Mayer, what it comes down to is if he wants to finish his degree out or not, but you can always do that, at a later time. He's obviously ranked 1 or 2, depending on who you ask, as the top 10 in the country. He's a first-round grade, etc. So 9 out of 10, I think they're both gone at the end of this season.
Well, that means, are they sitting on a bowl game? So it's like, this is the last time that they're going to be in a uniform. See what I'm saying?
Okay. I thought you meant, are they leaving after this season? No, I think they both play in the bowl game. I think no. If scale 1 to 10, I think like a 2 out of 10. I think they both play in the bowl game and finish out their collegiate career.
Interesting. Okay. All right.
Sorry for the misinterpretation.
No. That's okay. I'm going to put it at like an 8, because I am confident that Notre Dame is going to win this game. We'll get into our prediction here in a second. I am confident Notre Dame is going to win. If that's the case, I think they go to a New Year's 6. And if that's the case, I think that they both play. Right?
Same.
If they lose this game and they end up playing in a tier 1 ACC bowl, I could see them both sitting. So I'm going to say an 8 with this. So I've got a little bit of wiggle room for them to opt out, right? If they end up losing tonight. But I think that they both play in a bowl game if it matters, and a New Year's 6 game matters. So it's going to be very, very interesting for me, because obviously they played in a New Year's 6 last year, and Kyle Hamilton and Kyron Williams both sat. So we'll see what these guys end up doing. I just feel like these two are built a little bit differently.
I think they're a little bit more of gamers.
Right. And that's nothing against those other two guys.
I'm okay with either way.
Yeah.
It's just because I see both sides of the coin, right? But
100%.
I like you said, I just think there's a different bit of a makeup around these two. They're bigger, burlier guys, less chance of injury. You're not a running back taking a hit all the time. You're not a safety that had some injuries, in throughout the year. These guys have been both moderately, pretty healthy. So
All right. Yep, I'm with you. All right, next one. Scale of 1 to 10. Your interest level in the World Cup, Jess.
Interest in the World Cup as a whole is probably like 6 or 7. USA's group, a 10 out of 10. I'm all for supporting the United States, backing, our nation. We didn't make it 4 years ago, and I know a lot of people in the chat don't care about soccer, but this is a big event. It only happens every 4 years. You represent your country. The United States has historically not been great in the Cup. We've seen a little bit of resurgence recently and what soccer means within the United States. There's a lot of growth. There's a lot to be excited about. We see a lot of Premier League players now on the USA team, which is very exciting. They're upping their talent. So it does mean a lot to me. I'm not the overall biggest, huge soccer fan, but when USA is playing and we get to represent, the entire country, that's enough to draw me in, Vince.
It's very Olympic-ish to me. Like I'm a big Team USA guy, and I've watched every second of the U.S., the 2 USA matches, right? One of which I was on a show with Brian and Ryan, but I had it right here, and I watched the entire game, the draw with England, and that was huge for Notre Dame.
Yes,
Notre Dame for the USA. It was huge for U.S. soccer, right? Because I saw somebody tweet out the fact that if the English football team, like American football team, came over and played the United States football team, and they went to a draw, like. That's
very embarrassing.
That's embarrassing, and it's massive, right? So that was a huge draw for the U.S. So yeah, I'm into it. I hope they make it to the league or the round of 16. They just got to beat Iran, I believe.
Yes. So
on Monday.
That result yesterday after Iran beating Wales was very beneficial to the United States. A draw was more than acceptable, and a win would be like top of the world. You just couldn't lose, and you couldn't lose. By a lot. But United States is in the driver's seat now. They control their own destiny. You beat Iran, you're in. If you tie, there's other things that need to happen, but you definitely win if you're in. And to getting into that, group of 16 stage is very big because they did it, 8 years ago, and were, one kick away from going down to the 8. So it's very, very interesting to see. I love it. I watched every minute yesterday. My heart was racing. Actually, I was so nervous throughout the entire game.
Right? It's hard to do a show while watching that. I'll tell you.
Yeah, just for a draw. So I was very impressed with the performance though yesterday. Great showing. I think the United States team is getting a lot better, which is fun to see.
All right, let's move on to some actual football talk here. Fill in the blank. The fact that Nebraska is reportedly targeting Matt Rule as their next coach is blank.
I think it's a great fit, and if I'm not mistaken, Marshall maybe dropped a pre-early bomb that I think Nebraska might have made the hire already. Their season is over. They're not in a bowl game. I need to fact check that myself, but I think there's like an 80% chance that Rule has already kind of been hired by Nebraska, but I think that's amazing. I think that's a great fit. I think Rule got a little bit over his head, in the NFL. I think he's a great coach. There's nothing that should be taken away from him. He got into, a bad quarterback situation in the NFL. And as you know, that's the most important position in the NFL. If you don't have a good quarterback in the NFL, it's going to be a tough road for you. So I like him going back to Nebraska. I like his intensity and physicality and all those things. And I think that fits a Nebraska program that is looking for a resurgence to get back to that national prominence that they used to have.
Yep, absolutely. And he's in a division of the Big Ten, which is terrible. So he could be at the top of that division pretty stinking quickly, to be honest with you. So
yeah, everyone in the chat is saying he's hired. We're a little behind, Vince.
Well, that's okay. I mean, it is what it is. I wrote the questions last night, so what can you say? All right. So moving on, our next question. The fact that the Cowboys-Giants game drew a record 42 million viewers is blank.
A lot of people aren't going to like this one, but it's expected.
Oh, you are such a Dallas fan.
They're America's team for a reason, everyone. Whether you hate them or love them, what do you think you're doing? You're tuning in to watch. You drop that game and Thanksgiving right after, the big Thanksgiving lunch. Everyone's got their naps in. You roll around and what do you know? You got the Cowboys, America's team rolling on the TV against the 7-3 Cowboys versus the 7-3 Giants.
It's
the
a big
NFC
game implications wise, right?
Yes, because that
for a while.
Right. And, Philadelphia is obviously 9-1. They're holding down the top spot, but the Giants and Cowboys are fighting for that wild card spot and what is now known as the NFC Beast, baby. The NFC East is back, everyone. So it was just a good game to see. Both teams had a lot of implications on the line, and the Cowboys came out and handled business. So I really enjoyed it.
All right. One final question before we get to our Notre Dame USC prediction. Would you rather see Notre Dame face and defeat Tulane in the Cotton Bowl, so a New Year's Six Bowl, or an SEC team in a Tier 1 ACC Bowl? So better bowl or better opponent, basically, is what we're looking at here.
Vince, when it comes to the end of the season, it doesn't matter to me. You've worked up to play in the best bowl game as possible, no matter your opponent. You just line up and play who you're supposed to play. And Notre Dame hasn't won the New Year's Six bowl games in I don't know how long. It's been frustrating. I want to see them win one of those. I can't tell you the last time that they've won it, and it's
might have been
frustrating.
Like 93.
Yeah, that's what I mean. The 90s. It's been a long time. So I'm more so for wins that help your program or set your program apart from everyone else. And I think it's a great first season for Marcus Freeman if he can end with a New Year's Six bowl after his first game last year of losing and kind of letting a New Year's Six bowl game slip away from him. So I'm all for the better bowl game and not the better opponent.
I'm kind of torn on this one, to be perfectly honest with you, because, if Notre Dame goes out, they win a New Year's Six against a Tulane or a Cincinnati or a UCF or whoever ends up being that opponent, right? There's going to be plenty of people out there that are going to be like, yeah, that didn't count. You know what I mean? And now it still counts. It's a New Year's Six game. They've had plenty of opportunities in New Year's Six games that they haven't been close or that they've been close and they haven't been able to do it. You've had all kinds of opportunities. And then in New Year's Six games, they've beaten LSU a few times. I mean, they've beaten some pretty good teams throughout oh my gosh, it's been 30 years since they've won a New Year's Six game. Good Lord. But I will say that I want the New Year's Six game monkey off their back, just as DT Rollhunter says. I want that monkey off Notre Dame's back, and so I don't care who the opponent is. I want them to go to a New Year's Six game, but that also means that they have to win this game tonight. And so with that said, Jesse Stiers, I gave my prediction yesterday. I'm going to give you the opportunity. You have the floor. What is your prediction for Notre Dame USC tonight?
Oh, I lost sleep about this one, Vince.
I bet you did.
By
the way, your dad picked USC to win. I
saw that. I saw he caught some flack too. He's just doing his job, everyone. He's just giving you his honest opinion.
Yeah.
And that's what he's told to do. Man, this is so tough. I've gone back and forth on this. Here's what I'm gonna say. Notre Dame can't allow USC to get into the 40s. If USC gets into the 40s, they win this game. This game has to stay in the 30s, potentially the 20s if Notre Dame wants to win. I think Notre Dame has to get into the 30s in order to confidently win this game. So there's a lot of layers to this. When it's all said and done, I have Notre Dame 37 and USC 34. This is going to be a backyard brawl. This is about both teams, throwing back the haymakers, getting up from the canvas, returning the punch. But I think Notre Dame's physicality is ultimately what USC is not going to be prepared for and something that they haven't seen all year. And when you get down into the fourth quarter, it's going to be a lot. But that said, Notre Dame has to do some things. They need to create a turnover. They need to get pressure on Caleb Williams. They need to create a big-time special teams play. Maybe another blocked punt, maybe a big kick return. Just something to suck the life out of USC after they had a big momentum shift in their favor.
Could not agree more. And in case you missed it yesterday, I picked Notre Dame to win 31-24. The 31 in honor of 31 personnel, because I think that is what is going to win the game for Notre Dame. But you said all the right things. I think a lot of things have to go Notre Dame's way for them to win this game. None of them are out of reach. Like, all of those things can happen. We have seen them at one time or another with Notre Dame. There is no doubt about that. So we're both picking Notre Dame to win. Everybody on the IB staff picked Notre Dame to win, except for Sean, but he's doing his job, people. That's what he sees. It's okay. He's in Bahamas, man. His mind is mush. We'll give him a pass on this one. But everyone out there, tonight, 7 o'clock on YouTube, we are going to have a watch party for the game tonight. So join me, Ryan, Brian, Sean, maybe Jesse if he's bored. I don't know. But we're all going to watch the game. Watch it with us. Have some fun. Everybody's always wanted to watch a game with us. Well, now's your opportunity. So we're going to start at 7 o'clock. So we're going to do a little bit of a pregame, and then we're going to dive right in at 7:30. And you are going to ride the train with us. Ride that roller coaster. I will be heavy on the mute button on my end.
I was going to say, Vince, I don't know if these people want to hear me in game.
That's the problem.
I get yelling at the TV, man.
Yes.
I have no shame to admit that I get a little loud sometimes.
I do as well. I mean, I've been well trained being in the press box since 2004. So a lot of times I just sit and stew if something bad is happening, but we will see what happens. So this is something we've never done before, people. So you might as well come join us. Check it out. 7 o'clock. The game starts at 7:30, and then we'll take about a 15-minute break afterwards. We'll come back. We'll do the post-game show. Should be a lot of fun, everybody. So come join us. That's going to do it for this edition of the IB Countdown to Kickoff. Thank you, Jess, for jumping in and saving the day since your dad is in the Bahamas where they don't believe in internet, which is unfortunate. But thanks for coming. I thought it was a good show. 2 hours went by a heck of a lot faster than I thought it would. We actually went longer. So for Jesse, I'm Vince. Thanks for watching, and we hope to see you again tonight at 7 o'clock for our IB Nation watch party. That's what I just named it. The IB Nation watch party. Hope everybody has a good day. Go Irish.
Go Irish.